Hey fam! So I decided that today I'm going to give you guys something a little bit different than what I've done so far on my channel. But for anyone who likes to read, I imagine you, like myself and many others, do also read nonfiction on occasion. And I do myself. One of the biggest categories, I guess, of nonfiction that I personally read a lot of would be the more like spiritual, witchy, pagan type of nonfiction information, as well as like history and stuff like that. But I am a bookish witch, so I figured for this very first video I would suggest to you some books that either helped me when I was first discovering something aside from Christianity, and some of the books that have just been really transformative for me on my own personal path over the last 20 years or so. When I first came across witchy anything, the first form of it that I came across was Wicca, which, for those who are unfamiliar still at this point, if that is the case, I'm not going to have a whole ramble about it, but Wicca is a specific religion. Yes, it's more fluid and free flowing than a lot of organized religions. I wouldn't really call Wicca in many cases these days organized. However, it is a religion. Whereas witchcraft is a practice. It is a spiritual practice. It is an earth-based practice, but it doesn't really have to involve any religion, or it can involve whatever religion you want it to, really. Get what I'm saying? I no longer identify as Wiccan, and I have not for quite some time. However, like I said, it was very much like the roots of my own pagan journey. So, yeah, let's jump into this because I'm pretty excited to share these things with you guys. All right, fam. So, book number one, the first book that I would recommend, and it was also the very first book that I personally ever read on Wicca, I found this. Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham. Now, Scott Cunningham was a very well-known and beloved author in the community, and authority in the community, I should say, and the reason that he was so helpful to me personally is because he actually writes for solitary practitioners. Now, me personally, I am not a fan of organized religion. Spirituality is very subjective, and so even within Wicca, now when Wicca was first formed, there was very much traditions. It was much more of an organized religion, although unlike many organized religions that we can think of off the top of our heads today, Wicca did actually encourage doing your own research and cultivating your own, wisdom and truth in regards to these kinds of things, right? Coming up with what made sense and resonates for you, right? Which is honestly one of the huge reasons that I no longer really identify as Wiccan, but it is still a foundation for me. And so for that reason, I decided to include this book in this list, because even if you are not personally interested in specifically Wicca, I think that this book gives like a really good foundational basis of like somewhere to begin, but you can very much turn it into your own thing because it is for solitary eclectic practitioners, which just means, again, it pulling from whatever sources and finding truth for yourself, essentially. I also think that Scott Cunningham, the way that he writes, it's very easily digestible. I literally, when I was 16, I read this entire book in a couple of days while on vacation in New Orleans and exploring, because I just ate it up. Every time I sat down, had a chance, every time I was on the bus, I was just, you know what I mean? But it gives all this core foundational knowledge. It talks about the holy days of the year, right? The Sabbats. It talks about the Esbats. It talks about the god and the goddess, or, divine masculine, divine feminine energies. It talks about writing spells. It talks about recipes for incenses and oils, and what all these different things are used for, the tools of the craft, if you will. And again, it's very easy for you to take and kind of adapt in whatever way feels right for you. And as you can see, it's a pretty thin book. So yeah, big fan. moving on. The next book that I personally think is worth getting, which it's not a book that you would necessarily sit down and read from beginning to end. However, it has been so transformative to me on my own journey, and that is this giant encyclopedia. This is called The Ultimate Book of Shadows for the New Generation Solitary Witch, otherwise known as just Solitary Witch by Silver Ravenwolf. Even though Silver Ravenwolf is not a personal favorite author of mine, this one book, if you had to get any, really in general, if you had to get one book and that was all you could get for Wicca, and again, it can be, you can take any of this and turn it into whatever you want. It is kind of from a Wiccan perspective. There's definitely a lot of Wiccan stuff in here, but there's also a lot of just straight up witchcraft stuff in here. And so I find it really inspiring and is very much like an encyclopedia in a lot of ways. So, but this one goes over, again, this goes over everything. It goes over the Sabbats, the Esbats, the god, the goddess, like the charge of the goddess. It goes over, you can literally find all this information about the planets, astrological signs, moon phases, different spells and rituals for all kinds of rites of passage, different, like this page that I randomly opened up to has a whole bunch of tinctures that you can make that will help heal different parts of the body, right? It has, let's see, let me just open up now. Oh, it has a whole section on reading tarot and different types of divination, cleansing, consecrating, casting a circle, the 9 steps of a ritual, like literally anything you can think of, empowering a symbol or sigil that you have made yourself for a specific purpose, candle magic, leaves, art projects. Anyway, so I think you get my point. But this book, yeah, you can see it's huge. It's very old and well loved. I love this book, you guys. I love it so much. If you have not picked it up yet, just listen. Are you guys weird like me? Do you like that? I love it. All right. So the third book, which is also going to be a big, juicy one, is this baby right here. Whoop, that's a little bright. A Witch's Bible by Janet and Stewart Farrar. Honestly, I never know if I'm saying their name right. Janet and Stewart Farrar are definitely more traditional Wiccans, for sure. This one is much more from a coven perspective. That being said, them being traditionalists, it's like going further back into the roots of Wicca. And again, this is a very large book, but it has a lot of the same kind of information as these other two, except from more of a coven perspective. It even has a section on like witchcraft and sex. So she talks here a lot about clairvoyance, divination, and this is more written, I'm just going to show you because I'm failing to find words, but it's more written out in a very, it's very thick, it's very dense, it's very informative, and it has a lot of research behind it. I have definitely, over the years, I read from front to back, but you can also use it very much like an encyclopedia and just search different things. I absolutely love it. Again, this one has a very special place in my heart because it is basically a classic when it comes to Wicca. So yeah, and again, if you're trying to practice with other people, this is a really good one to take a look at because it has all the rituals kind of written out, shows you how to do that with a group as opposed to just being on your own. It's going to depend with everybody what you prefer. Okay, y'all. So this next book here, I am going to suggest, however, I have some thoughts that I want to share about this one first. During my journey, when I was still identifying as Wiccan, but trying to learn more and grow and expand and whatever, one of the traditions of Wicca that I came across that I was initially very attracted to was Dianic Wicca, otherwise known as feminist witchcraft. It is not very traditional Wiccan at all because Dianic Wiccans really only work with goddesses. For me, I found this really appealing because they are very feminine focused, and that was especially appealing to me as someone with a Christian background. I was, especially at the time, much more interested in connecting with my divine feminine, right? So that being said, I am no longer, I no longer really support at all Dianic Wicca or feminist witchcraft in that kind of way because I found out many years ago at this point, are very much TERFs. For those unfamiliar, that would be trans exclusionary radical feminists. I can't get down with that. Here's the thing, yes, someone who is born with a uterus is going to have a different life experience than someone who is not. But that doesn't mean that those other people are not also women. And so it was very upsetting to me to find out that that trans women were not welcome at Dianic rituals and festivals. So that being said, I do have one Dianic book that I will probably keep forever because I'm not even 100% sure it's still in print. And I did find a lot of use out of it if I detach from Zsuzsanna Budapest's very turfy mindset. And that would be this book, The Holy Book of Women's Mysteries. Now, for me, the reason that I am still including this, despite my very conflicted feelings about Dianic Wicca, is because as someone with a uterus, and as someone who experiences endometriosis and has had a lot of different trauma specific to the fact that I was born with a uterus, I found a lot of rituals in here to be very helpful. I found it to be very empowering. And again, I found it at a time in my life that it really did help me a lot in a lot of different ways. And it's hard to explain without making an entire video about just that. But that being said, this is essentially a book of goddesses. It's a book of rituals that are rites of passage that have to do with your menstrual cycle, or if you decide to have children or deciding to not have children. Again, it's a very feminist based kind of book. It talks a lot about women's mysteries and all of that kind of stuff, which is a huge part of what initially drew me to Wicca and witchcraft as a whole, is that embracing of the divine feminine and honoring it, and in some instances, yes, rising it above the divine masculine because it has been beaten down so long. That being said, just focusing entirely on the divine feminine is not necessarily the path for me. So in short, this book does have quite a lot of beautiful ritual and concepts to it. But keep in mind, if you do read anything by Zsuzsanna Budapest, she is kind of a TERF. If you go on to, I don't even remember what it's called now because it's been years, but if you look up Dianic Wicca online, maybe they've changed their perspectives now. To be fair, I don't know. Maybe. I would hope that they have. But when last I checked, probably like a decade ago now or something, they were still very much on the trans women exclusion train. So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Like I said, I feel conflicted, but this book will always be very special to me for my own reasons. The next book that I would recommend is this one here, Maiden, Mother, Crone by DJ Conway. The reason that I would very strongly recommend this one is because this is basically a deep dive into the triple goddess, who is very important specifically in Wicca and really is mostly at least in that kind of way, it is more of a Wiccan concept, although pretty much every goddess that you will research in any ancient religion is going to fit into one or all of these classifications, right? And I really love this book because it goes over myths from all over the world of maiden goddesses, mother goddesses, and then crone goddesses. And towards the back, it has some basic information about symbolism and divination and tools. And it has a few little rituals in there for connecting with the different aspects of the goddess herself. So I found this to be really, really helpful in just really understanding at a core level who the goddess is and what the divine feminine really is. So yeah, definitely check that one out. And the last one for today, at least, that I think I'll be recommending. I did have a few others I was going to do, but this is already getting kind of long. So the last one I think I'll be recommending for today is The Horned God of the Witches. And this one is by Jason Mankey. Mankey, kind of like that name. But I got this one because the Horned God is one of the few pagan divine masculine energies that I've ever actually really been able to connect with, and I absolutely love him. Now, so this talks about the symbolism of the horned god of the wild, the combination of the animalistic and more intellectual sides of the mind. It talks about the divine masculine and who he is. It talks about why the horned god got so maliciously maligned, and the history of him and the different forms that he has taken, right? So think Pan, Bacchus, Cernunnos, Hern, all of these different names that people have used, and there's so many more. Set, Lucifer is even discussed in this book as well, and kind of the, how the horned god was maligned to be this evil satanic thing, although I have different opinions on Satan and Satanism these days myself anyway, so it's a whole other thing, but super, super helpful, especially if, like myself, you have a harder time connecting with the divine masculine in any of his forms. I personally am a huge nature freak. I'm a fairy. I love creatures. I love the forest. So connecting with this aspect of, the wild god archetype was much easier for me and much easier to, help me understand more of what divine masculine really means. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this to give you kind of an overview and a deep dive on the Wiccan or pagan idea of God as well. All right, fam. So those are my first recommendations for you guys. Like I said, they are pretty much all more Wiccan perspective based, but it's subjective. It's all subjective. This is just to give you a good foundation, and even if it's not really your thing, if you're interested in researching any of those things, these are all really informative books, and I hope that you get something from any of the ones you decide to pick up. Have you read any of these ones already? What are some of your opinions about them? What are some that you would suggest for people who especially are just discovering Wicca and or witchcraft? Please leave a comment below. Let's chat about it. I would love to hear. And thank you guys so much for being here. To all my subscribers, love you guys. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Please do it. Please. Thank you. And I love you guys. I'll see y'all very soon.